Abraham Lincoln, Harriet Tubman, Robert E. Lee, Frederick Douglass, all famous figures related to Civil War history. So famous that we sometimes forget that, once upon a time, they were just people, like us. Each had a life story that somehow became part of Civil War history.
Are you ready for school to start back up?
I mean, who is?
Yeah. Speaking of school, I'm so happy Brendan told us about this bike trail.
I mean, it's
beautiful. Yes.
Yeah, it's nice weather, but what's that up there?
I'm not sure.
Let's check it out.
Come on. Oh, wow, Zach. It's an African cemetery.
Huh.
It says a couple of local kids found the cemetery.
Well, based on the pictures, it looks like it's been restored. Looks like a lot of research went into this.
Yeah, it's another sign over there, too.
Let's check it out.
I wonder if they have, like, the names of the...
Civil War history can be found in places, too. Places with their own stories, like the African Union Church Cemetery in Delaware City.
The 5 members of the United States Colored Troops. I wonder which 5 they are.
Most likely the ones with the
the
American flags.
Yeah, that probably makes sense.
More than 950 free blacks from Delaware served in the war.
From Delaware served in the Civil War.
How many people do you think, like, were from here that served?
Like if there was a town or something?
Maybe.
Do you want to go check that one out?
Sure, why not?
It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. Poketown, Delaware. Poketown is one of the earliest remaining free black settlements in Delaware.
Like a whole community, like churches, schools, stores.
Looks like it was across the canal, but if there is anything there, it's just poof.
Well, do you think there's other like black soldier cemeteries?
I would hope so. I mean, that's an important part of history.
But do you feel like they're as up to date as this one is?
I don't know. Why don't we investigate that?
Investigate. That's what historians do. They investigate the stories about a person, place, or event. They gather the facts to confirm those stories, and if so, define them as history. Zach and Jaelyn stumbled on the African Union Church Cemetery, which has been properly investigated and nicely restored. From the facts displayed on the signs, they learned that 5 Union colored troops from the Civil War are buried there, that they came from nearby Poketown, and that there were 950 like them who served from Delaware. In September 1862, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. This took effect in January 1863 and freed the slaves in the southern states. It also authorized the Union Army to begin recruiting free blacks in the North for military service. In May 1863, the Bureau of Colored Troops was established, and the new recruits were known as United States Colored Troops. The 950 from Delaware were mostly trained at Camp William Penn, just outside of Philadelphia, and joined the Union ranks in segregated regiments in early 1864. During the last 2 years of the war, the colored troops usually supported white regiments as servants to officers or were assigned tasks that did not involve frontline combat with the Confederates. Yet over time, the colored troops were given opportunities to engage the enemy directly, and many served with distinction. By the end of the war, 178,000 blacks had served in the Union Army, accounting for 10% of the total enlistment. After the war, many returned to their home communities, where they lived out their lives and were buried in their local churches' black cemeteries.
I think it'll be pretty cool. I'll read this one.
Oh.
Oh, it was a church here.
Yeah.
Look at this place.
Looks clean.
It doesn't look like the last one, though.
True. Very true.
More up to date. The last one?
Yeah.
Was.
No, but that one's
Excuse me.
Oh.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How y'all doing?
I'm doing good. Hi.
My name's Reverend McCafferty. I pastor St. George, who owns this cemetery.
I'm Jaelyn.
I'm Zach.
Okay, what brought you over here?
We actually just went to go see a cemetery in Delaware City about the Civil War and the colored troops. So we're here today to see if we can see any colored troop tombstones.
Oh, that is great and awesome. We have 3 that we know of who served in the colored troops. Most of these people are from the 1800s, 1700s. A few of them are from the early 1900s, but they no longer bury people in here. So these are people who were pillars of Lewis community, because Lewis used to be a lot more African Americans here, but now there aren't many. So we think it's important to keep the history alive. So I'm glad y'all came, but I want to show you some of the Civil War veterans. And if you have any questions, just feel free to ask me. It's good to realize that these were actual people.
And then in Delaware too.
In Delaware,
yeah.
no less. And these are 2 of the Civil War soldiers.
Theo
Parker. And this is him. See him? Company, yes. See?
And then that's his son.
Wow. Amazing, right?
Yeah.
And actually, I've been here 8 years. And when I came, the cemetery was becoming in disrepair, where the gravestones were the worst. And what had happened was no one to keep it up. Thank God, Daughters of American Revolution volunteered to collaborate with us. And we came out and we hand cleaned all of these headstones.
That's amazing.
Last year and this spring. You notice those markers with just numbers on them.
Yeah.
And how does that make you feel?
It kind of like, it's kind of sad to think about like how they don't have names, because they were people.
It just makes me feel like uncomfortable a little bit. Like these are all people and they're just numbered. There are no names. If you go to cemeteries today, they have pictures.
Yeah.
They got quotes, name and date.
Yeah.
And these are literally just numbers, and some of them you can't even see the numbers anymore. So
Yeah, because it's like chipped off, and so again at that same point it kind of dehumanizes them.
Fortunately, Reverend Dr. McCafferty and her congregation are committed to discovering the histories of those lying under these nameless headstones and making sure their stories are not forgotten.
And anybody in the cemetery, we want it to be known, as you said, that these were people who lived and contributed to the community and overcame all kind of obstacles and made it anyway.
Investigating Delaware's colored troops have led Zach and Jaelyn to ask a bigger question. What was life like for blacks living in Delaware at the time of the Civil War? Some were free, but some were still enslaved. Fortunately, the Lewis Historical Society is investigating this also, and their Director of Education, Marcos Salavarria, is willing to help.
Welcome to the Lewis Historical Society. Our campus here at 110 Ship Carpenter Street is constructed of what are known as Sussex County scooters. So that means each of the buildings that you see here are scooted or picked up and moved from different parts of the county to recreate this village and 300 years of history.
Wow.
So what I want to tell you a little more about today is our plank house, which is being reinterpreted in history.
Okay.
And we are looking to reinterpret the building just here behind me as the enslaved person's cabin, dating to about the 1830s. George's AME Cemetery today, for about a century, was referred to at the time as, quote, the colored graveyard, along with, in a map dating to 1891, we have 7 buildings of a similar size and dimension referred to as, quote, the old slave quarters.
So I have just a general question. How do you know so much? Like, how much, like, how would you conduct, like, historical research?
So if you are interested in looking at your hometown and learning the history, do visit your local historical society, city hall, the library. Many historic documents related to a town are kept by those nonprofit or history-driven, research-driven organizations. But don't just stop at your town. Go further. For us in Lewis, we're looking at Lewis, then to Sussex County, then to Delaware, then really to the nation. So the connection that this building has, we can look through national census records. We can look through what are called pension records, the records of USCT, the U.S. colored troops who served and applied for pensions after the war. Their names, their stories are recorded.
And that's how you find out if, like, for example, when we were at the cemetery, when some of the tombstones, they were, messed up or they weren't as detailed. That's how you figure out if they were colored troops or
Yes.
in the Civil War.
Yes.
Okay.
So that cemetery, about 2020, 2021, they went through a survey known as GIS, which actually is ground penetrating radar, and they discovered there's a couple hundred gravestones above ground, but that technology revealed to us with unrefutable proof there's over 500 bodies buried. So those stories, those names, they may have been overlooked, they may have been ignored or purposefully hidden, but they are not going to be forgotten as long as research continues.
Okay, so for the markers over there that have numbers on them, would you guys be able to figure out who those people are since they don't have actual names or, any information?
From stone to stone, it depends, but what we know right now and what you saw earlier today, we know of at least 3 USCT troops from Company K, the 25th Regiment. So looking at that regiment as a whole, we know that these were men from Lewis or from Sussex County, Delaware, who went north to Philadelphia, trained at Camp William Penn. They were sent south on what's known as garrison duty, and they come back. So the names of these individuals, Private Theodore Parker, his great-great-great-granddaughter still lives in Sussex County. She has a photo growing up as a child with her second great-grandmother, the daughter of the man who fought, pictured at that gravestone. We know that George H. Wright, when he was discharged, a note in the margins 200 plus years ago, a simple note in the margins states that he purchased his rifle to take home with him. What does that say about the challenges he was going to face coming home?
Mm-hmm.
What were the decisions? We can't speculate in those decisions, but we know it was a clear decision he made to come home armed.
To better explain the life of enslaved blacks at the time, Marcos then takes Zach and Jaelyn into the plank house.
Again, this would have been, we estimate, between 1 and 7 total cabins located on Pilot Town Road, very near to the cemetery you spoke on, visited on earlier today. A structure like this, for it is not a home. In a situation of forced bondage, you would have had 4 to 6 individuals occupying the space. The slatted bed here, you have basically rough bed ticking, as it's known, or rough canvas stuffed with corn husks. So mother and father there. The children upstairs in what generously we call a loft. The conditions, indeed, were very, very difficult. The staircase is representative. You would have used something to that, possibly a small rope ladder or others to access the upper part. We can see in this home too just a couple accoutrements, the gardening tools. The garden outside does contain some heritage crops that we have tried to represent, such as okra, squash, the other foodways of the enslaved individuals in Lewis's past.
What was the diversity like back then? Was it more to the all-white side? Was it more diverse?
It's a very good question. So in 1800, we have census records for the town of Lewis that show the population was 17% enslaved individuals, 30% free blacks, and 53% Caucasian, which is starkly different than the makeup in present day. So that means at one time in Lewis's history, the town was almost half and half racially diverse. What that means as well is that industries, the later fishing industry that popped up in Lewis from 1885 all the way till 1966, was an integrated industry from the beginning. you have a great preponderance of black sailors. One of our veterans in the cemetery, Theodore Parker, notes that before joining the U.S. colored troops, his profession was that as a seaman. So you have a very unique space that Lewis was in its past and its makeup.
After thanking Marcos and the Lewis Historical Society, Zach and Jaelyn learn of a black cemetery in Milford. Their first stop is the Milford Museum to see if they can gather some additional information.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, welcome to the Milford Museum.
I'm Zach.
I'm Jaelyn.
And today we're doing a little bit of an investigation on colored troops during the Civil War. So do you guys have any research on that?
Yeah, we had looked at some cemeteries in Delaware City and in Lewis, and it brought us here to find some more colored troop cemeteries in stone down here.
Right, well, I'm glad you guys came. We do have a little bit about some of the colored troops that were here. I have something here. I was actually looking up some stuff before you guys got here. So if you see here on the highlighted in pink there, if you go down, these are all the colored troops. They are buried at St. Paul's Cemetery here in Milford. Unfortunately, this is about all we have currently here at the museum, although we have been working really hard to do some more research on the Black history here. So we have our full exhibit right behind me here is about the Black community in Milford, and we have been trying really hard to get people to tell us their stories, because these are stories we really want to tell. And that also includes our Civil War soldiers, so that's something we've been working hard on too, is figuring out more about them.
Is there anyone that you know who can help us out, who has more information on the cemetery or the colored troop stones that are there?
Yes, I actually do have someone who can help you. His name is Charles Hammond. He is the president of the Milford Museum board here, and he would definitely have some more information for you guys about the cemetery out there, about St. Paul's. So
Sweet.
I can get him in touch with you guys, and he can give you some information.
All right, thank
Awesome.
you. Oh, well, they have
Zach and Jaelyn then head over to St. Paul's Cemetery to meet with Charles Hammond, who remembers the cemetery from when he was a young man.
Hey,
Hi.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Doing good.
Good,
I'm
good.
Zach.
Hey, Zach.
We were doing a little bit of research on colored troops and kind of the burial sites of those
Okay.
during the Civil War.
Yes, we went to two other cemeteries, one in Delaware City and one in Lewis, Delaware, and this is the last one that we have come to.
So in the burial site at Delaware City, the maintenance seemed to be very clean. There were iron bars around the burial site.
And then we went to the one in Lewis, and it wasn't as kept up to par as the one in Delaware City, but it was a little better.
Okay. Well, what you're going to see here, you will not see that the immaculate cemetery. You're going to find some stones that actually have been broken. But just a little bit of history. This cemetery is a cemetery of St. Paul United Methodist Church. The building behind me was the first location of St. Paul United Methodist Church. The street northwest, 4th, and the street that now says Troy Avenue used to be known as Gutter Street. So the name has changed. Now what I have here, I have a layout, rough layout of where the stones were at the time that I came down to, to locate the stones. And obviously the stones are still there, but some of them are you're hardly able to really read them. Now the first stone that you see here is the stone of Samuel Layton. He was in Company B, and he was part of the 45th Regiment. So you're able to read that on the face of his stone, as you can see. And it is my concern that that is a stone as well, but it will have to be unearthed, because I'm almost sure that was a stone, and that probably was the stone of maybe a priestly white. Now here is a stone here by J.H. Purnell. You see Company H, 25th Regiment. That name Purnell resonates throughout our church. We had an organist that was in our church for over 50 years. Her maiden name was Purnell. I did not know that. And I found out in doing some research that she's of the Purnell family. She took the married name of Mitchell. Her son became a prominent NAACP leader, Lytton Mitchell. So at this point in time, I'm doing some in-depth research to try to track this family back to J.H. Purnell.
How do you do your research to find out the history behind all of these colored troops and like to be able to see if they were colored troops or if they fought in the Civil War?
I go to Ancestry.com, researching the name for one reason. The next thing, I also look at colored troops. I look at the different units that had colored troops, and then I try to research that name from that perspective also. So there are different ways of doing that. I even Google the name. If I got a birth date, I can make it a little bit closer to getting the exact one. If I can't find a birth date or a death date on the troop, I will maybe find the spouse, and I'll research the spouse and then reverse the process. Another member that is buried, supposed to be buried here, well, he is buried here because I've seen the stone. I can't find the stone now because of the growth. But his wife's stone is in the trees right there. And you can really visually see the stone of the member's wife right there.
Annie Jacobs, right?
Annie Jacobs, the wife of Noah Jacobs.
Do you come across any errors when you go to look up people's names?
Yes, but it is quite an in-depth process in doing this, and you just don't do it overnight. One error that I have found is that they will have a stone listed or a burial site listed here in Milford, and the same name appears with that in Smyrna. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to the location in Smyrna and walk that graveyard and see whether a stone is there.
Thank you for having us.
Well, I certainly thank you for even coming by and showing some interest.
Yes, and I hope you have great success with finding, all the rest of the information that you're looking for.
Zach and Jaelyn have investigated some of the history of Delaware's colored troops who served the Union during the Civil War. Their investigation began with the stories they read on the signs at the African Union Church Cemetery. It led them to find and visit other black cemeteries in the state, where they met others interested in the same history and who are conducting their own investigations. Through them, they learned more about black life in Delaware before and during the Civil War. Finally, Zach and Jaelyn discovered that only by investigating and gathering the facts behind a story can that story be acknowledged as an accurate piece of Civil War and American history.